Okay, so we're now going to start the next session for this study day, which is our manager panel, which is great. So I think we may not have Janet on the call at the moment, but hopefully she will join us. It might be that she is having technical problems or something else is happening. But we're really thrilled today to have Dr. Sean Pert, who's Deputy Chair of the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists Board of Trustees. He's also a consultant speech language therapist for Indigo Gender Services and a senior clinical lecturer at the University of Manchester. So those students who know him will know him, as I would say. Pauline Downie, who's professional lead for speech and language therapy services in NHS Lanarkshire. Thanks for waving, Pauline, that's great. And Sarah Buckley, who's company director and practice manager for Sarah Buckley Therapies Ltd. And Sarah's also vice chair of ASLTIP, so we also have a lot that we talk about quite regularly. So thank you so much for joining us. So the aim of this session, I guess it's really building on what you've all heard from the newly qualified practitioner presentations, but this time it's going to be a bit different in format. So I'm going to be asking our colleagues who've joined us a question, and it really to give them an opportunity to share with you their sort of experience and understanding of some of the issues that you're going to be interested in. So my first question will be to Sean, as Janet isn't here at the moment, is, so Sean, when you receive an application, what makes it stand out for you, Sean?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Kamini. Thank you for asking that question. So it's really tough, actually, because a lot of the time all the information is very similar for the candidates because it's often anonymised for us. So what I'm looking for is someone who's really thought about how they would meet this role. Why is it that you would like this particular post? So if you kind of just saying, well, I want to work as a speech language therapist, well, so does everyone else. So have you got a hobby? Maybe you've done some volunteering. Maybe you've read about the service. Maybe you have seen a presentation. And what is it that's really sparked your interest? So we want to know why you feel that you would be good in this role, so we want to hear about you as a person, because we know you're a qualified SLT, that's great. So we just want to know how you would fit in with our team.
Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts, Sean. So Pauline, over to you. What do you look for?
Hi everyone. Some similar things. An application that's easy to read, to make my life easy for me. I'm reading a lot of applications. I love a heading as well, I have to say. And write it to show evidence that you meet the person spec. Say why you are suitable for this role, and also why you want to work for us. And show your own values in the application. I do tend to remember if people have contacted me before, so do phone up and chat, and it's nice and more relaxed than an interview situation, so do phone and ask some questions beforehand. Okay,
thanks very much. So over to you, Sarah. What's your other thoughts on that?
So similar to my colleagues, I'm looking for someone who's really done their research. It's a bit different in the independent sector. We're less likely to have a formal job specification, but something that shows that the person understands the difference between independent sector NHS and why they're interested in independent sector working. And anything that gives me a real sense of the person. So it's about me looking for someone that's going to be a good fit for me, but it also has to be a good fit for them. So something that's starting to tell me, are we going to be a good fit for each other?
Okay, that sounds really interesting in terms of the research, and I think some of the NQPs mentioned that too. Apparently Janet is trying to get on, but she's having internet and connectivity issues, so I think on that basis we'll continue. So my next question for this panel are about virtual interviews, and people have talked about this already. So how has this changed the process, and how should students prepare? Sarah, do you want to start the answer to this question?
Sure. So the interview itself doesn't look that much different, I'd have to say. I think the critical thing is making sure that you're comfortable with the tech. I think we're all a lot better now than we were 18 months, 2 years ago at using technology for those meetings, but check you've got everything set up. And even though it's online, so it's virtual, still be professional, still look the part, still look like you're ready to present yourself at interview.
Okay, that's really helpful. So Janet was going to go next, so I'll go to you, Sean.
Thanks. Yes, I think as Sarah says, it's not really that much different. But if we were in person, we'd have a little chat at the beginning, and people think that's kind of not really important and getting ready for the actual interview, kind of the launch into the interview questions. Actually, introducing yourself, being really clear about, particularly for my service, being clear about your pronouns, kind of saying a bit about how you've got online today and all those kind of things, those kind of small talk things to connect with us as a human being. Because I'm thinking, is this how you would be with a service user online? Would you have a little chat and put them at ease? Because if you're putting me at ease, I think, great, I really like this applicant. They've got confidence to kind of have that little small talk. We're about communication, aren't we? So I think don't just think about the questions, think about the whole experience, and making an impression by coming across as a friendly, kind of confident person is really helpful.
That's a really interesting tip. So that whole thing about how you communicate and the warmth that you bring, because you don't have that, as you said, if it's virtual. Pauline, what's your thoughts on that question?
Some similar things. The process hasn't really changed that much at all. It's just on a computer instead of face to face. And the added advantage for people is that you can apply for jobs anywhere you like without having to travel for the interview. And for me up in Scotland, that's fantastic to have people applying from other places. So again, make sure you can use the technology, have a practice, and just wear what you would usually wear to an interview. I think, the format is really the same, welcome and introductions and some small talk to try and relax everybody, although my usual banter of asking people about their journey, I've had to find some different small talk, I'm afraid. And then, the questions from the panel, and don't forget to ask your questions to the panel. We've had a couple of hiccups in some of our early interviews, and we did have to revert to using teleconferencing, so it was just on telephones. You could maybe ask, what will we do if the technology doesn't work, or they might tell you that. But I think it's pretty robust these days.
That's great. And in fact, Janet, if she was here, some of her tips were about the importance of checking connectivity, which she's clearly having difficulties with at the moment, and your environment. And I actually interviewed somebody recently, and their connectivity failed, a bit like I had a problem this morning too. So there is something about dealing with the unexpected and how you can build in some sort of backup plans for that, and not letting it throw you as well if that happens. Looking at a quiet, calm space without too much background noise, which can be difficult if you've got drilling going on outside your house, but maybe even explain that, I guess. Attentive listening and good non-verbal skills, even though you're working virtually, seems to be a key other area that she was going to pick up as well. So moving to the next question, it's really touching and building on what you were saying, Sean, is really when interviewing, what core skills and soft skills are you looking for? Pauline, do you want to start the answer to that question?
Yep, I think it was Shabana that said, be you. I think that's fantastic advice. I am looking for someone who can really show me that they are caring and compassionate, and that they'll treat other people, and that means other staff, the clients, the patients, with dignity and respect, and as equal partners in their assessment and therapy and rehab process or journey. So it would be good to have, I know your theoretical knowledge will all be fantastic, but it will be good to have an understanding of the impact of any communication and swallowing difficulty on that person's life, as well as your theoretical knowledge of the clinical conditions. And so the other advice I would say is if you're using examples from your clinical placements, then really try and choose the examples relevant to the post, if you have them. And if you don't have practical experience, show how that could generalise. So if you're applying for an adult job or a paediatric job, try and choose relevant examples. And the other thing I could say is show how you've reflected and learned from a range of your experiences. A lot of you will have other employment, will have volunteered. So it's not just about placements, it's about your whole experience as a person and what you've learned from it.
That's really important, and that links back to the questions that students have asked about the fact they might not have had as much chance to get out and do practical experience. But what you said, Pauline, is actually there's a whole wealth of life experience you might have had and how you bring that into the interview as well. Sarah, do you want to go next on this question?
Sure. So yeah, I absolutely agree. Life experience. And I suppose just to reassure students, what I'm looking for is, I work in a paediatric service. I'm looking for paediatric learning. It doesn't necessarily need to be paediatric experience because they may not have had that experience. But if, as Pauline says, if they can demonstrate generalizable skills and demonstrate that they have got that learning, that academic learning, and that they're keen and enthusiastic to take that to next steps to the practical, that's more than enough for me. I'm also looking for people who have a real understanding that it's more than just working with the patient or the client, that there is that wider group of people around the patient and client, and that kind of broader understanding of what they're bringing to that job in terms of, as Pauline says, empathy, but also those communication skills in terms of interacting with parents and carers and siblings and what that looks like in kind of different levels. And then in terms of interview, I think it's really key that in an interview, even if you get caught on the hop and if you get asked a question and you really don't know how to answer it, just demonstrating your online thinking, demonstrating that you've got a bit of a workaround, showing me that even if you don't know the answer, you're able to show me something from your clinical learning. I think I really appreciate that because it shows me that you can do that online thinking.
Thank you. Sean, over to you.
Yeah, I would really like to say I agree completely what's already been said, and to kind of pick up on that, if you are, as we often do, talk about a particular case study or an example from your placement or from your learning, try and use person first language. So a person with aphasia, a person who's experiencing dysphagia, it really matters that you are caring and compassionate, and that's not just a tick box, it's kind of how we speak, how we think, how we interact. I was talking just this morning to some parents who are starting to come to terms with the fact that their child has developmental language disorder, and kind of considering how do you present that to somebody without just kind of plonking it and causing distress. A lot of my trans clients have high levels of anxiety and high levels of discrimination against them, and we need people who can kind of go, well, today I can tell that you really need just to chat and some support rather than me ploughing on with this assessment and doing what's in my plan, and I have to do my plan. So we are a people service first and foremost, and we want people to really say what a warm and supportive service we are. So I think whichever area you're in, think carefully about how you would discuss. So when you're doing those case discussions or you're talking about your practice, make sure you talk about the person first, and really show us that you see the humanity and the real reason we do this job, which is to equip people in ways to cope with these conditions which are impairing people's social lives, their work lives, their interpersonal communication. That's why we do speech therapy, and I think it's easy to lose sight of that if you're talking about something technical. So technical language is great. It's great to know all about technical language, but how would you explain that in terms that say, I work with lots of families who they can't have literacy, their language isn't written down, or they're from central Manchester, they might find it really difficult to read and very embarrassed to do that, so you can't just give them a leaflet. How are you going to explain these really complex things in ways that are both supportive and explain it really nicely.
It's really important. So it's very much the why are we here? You know, what's our purpose as speech language therapists to support people's functional outcomes and how communication impacts on their whole life. I think that's really, really important. So a few things that Janet was going to say, I'll just quickly cover, was around the importance of looking at and these are more how you respond in a interview itself, is showing good listening and confidence to ask for reframing a question, checking understanding and being able to stay on time and summarize well. Interesting enough, she's also saying having energy and to show motivation to join the team. So that's quite an interesting reflection that she had. So I'm going to move on to the next question, and Sean, I'm going to ask you to start first. So what questions can or should candidates ask at the interviews, ask the interviewers, sorry. So we've heard people saying, you know, you should maybe ring up before to have a little chat, but actually at the interview itself, what do you think the question should be? And again, the NQPs that have reflected on some of the questions they might have asked too.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to say is, from our point of view, this is the bit where we've been scribbling your answers down because we desperately want to score you up fairly, and we've... Sorry,
Sean, I'm going to interrupt. Somebody's saying that you're quite quiet, so okay, I'll get you to start again and move. Yeah, that's better. Brilliant, thank you.
That's what happens when you put your coffee cup near your microphone and push it away. So things like making sure that we have an opportunity to kind of see that you've thought through the role. So you might have demonstrated that in the interview, but we really, really want you to ask us about the service, you know, and to find out more. So the worst thing is to say, no, I've got no questions, or you know, when can I start, or something like that. So that's what not to do. What to do would be ask about what support is available. So I would expect to provide supervision. I would expect you to be really interested in that and to find out about that. But also things like, how does the service work? So do we have a prioritisation system? Do you have a way of meeting the needs of people with higher clinical need? Also, as a newly qualified, you probably aren't very sure how to prioritise, manage a caseload, manage a diary. You know, I think that's one of the hardest things, managing the demands on your time. So asking about, you know, do we have shadowing opportunities, meetings with maybe people who have joined the department a year or so ago and can tell me, you know, show me the ropes and tell me how we work. Have you got a patient information system? What training is available on that? So just really showing interest in, so that gets me thinking, oh, this person's imagining working for me, and you know, that they're really good questions to ask when I would be settling somebody in, so I can kind of envisage you already starting in my department. So yeah, it's a good opportunity to make that impression and realise that it's not just the clinical skills, it's the everyday management skills that you're probably going to need support with too.
Thanks very much. So I'm going to go to Pauline next. Pauline.
Hi, yeah. Yeah, the questions are really important because I think it shows that you are interested in working for us or whoever you're interviewing for. So do ask about support and supervision, particularly in your NQP year, and also ask about staff wellbeing and CPD opportunities. And even if you know the answer, like say you have a friend that works there or you've read it on the website, still ask the question. You know, you can say, I noticed on your website that you talk about support and supervision. Tell me a bit more about that. So some good questions I've been asked are, somebody asked me, or asked the whole panel, what advice would you give me if I was successful in getting this job? Thought that was a good one. And what are the priorities for your service? I've been asked that one as well. So, and I think again, one of the NQPs earlier asked about the impact of COVID. I think that would be a really good question as well, as what's changed. So that's me.
Thanks very much. Sarah.
Yeah, similar to my colleagues. I mean, I own and run my own company, so any questions about the company and any opportunity to talk about it are very welcome. if I'm honest. Reflecting that they've looked on the website, you know, I've seen that you do this screening initiative. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? Shows that they have done their research. I had a lovely interview once where someone said, what are you looking for in a speech and language therapist? And I think that's a really nice question in terms of kind of having that real nice back and forth conversation. So it is a dialogue rather than question answer. That's really nice. Supervision, CPD, absolutely. In the independent sector, it is quite helpful to find out about how the organisation is structured, because it's not always structured in bands the same way that an NHS organisation would be. So what's the structure and what are the opportunities for progression are quite important in the independent sector.
Thanks very much. So the next question we've already been covering a little bit as part of the study day so far. As we've heard through the questions and the NQPs who've spoken, that we're very aware that many final year students are feeling anxious about becoming an NQP due to lack of placements. Can you provide information on whether reduced hours or no hours of placement will still prepare students for life as an NQP, and what kind of support you think they can expect? Sean, could I start with you on that one, please?
Yeah, sure. I hope I'm loud enough now, by the way. So, well, a year ago, we set up the Indigo Gender Service. So it's a year, and we've set up an entire service entirely online. All of it is telehealth. And I have had students on placement on telehealth, and I'm really aware as a clinical educator, the challenges that everyone has had, but especially acutely aware that students have had a very different experience. So we know that most universities have either had telehealth placements or some hybrid placements, plus things like virtual learning, video learning. We see that as really, really valid, and we want to know that you're a good problem solver, that you're thinking about the whole person. And really, you know, if I'm looking for a band 6 or 7 post, then I'm really looking for an experienced person. But for a newly qualified person, we're looking for someone who's eager to learn, open-minded, and most importantly, knows when you're out of the depth and says, I'd like some help here, please. Is that okay? And is just nice and calm about asking for help appropriately. And in my team, I actually approached one of our team because I said, you've not asked me for help. I'm really worried. I was not worried about the person who was asking for help all the time. But the person who was asking for help all the time kept apologising. And I said, eventually I had a little sign saying, don't ask for help by apologising, you know, just ask. We really feel that this is a profession where lifelong learning. I'm still learning about my profession. So it's absolutely fine at this stage. It's normal, it's healthy, and we really, really want to support you in your new role. So really, don't worry about it, but make sure you say in the interview, you know, I'm really confident about knowing where I'm confident and where I need further help, and that will be really reassuring for us.
Thank you. That's really, really helpful. So over to you then, Pauline. What's your feedback to NQPs on that?
Similar things. I mean, managers are very, very aware of the disruption that there has been to student learning. And we weren't able to offer placements at first, and then we did go on to offer virtual and hybrid placements. And we've had some very good feedback from students as well. And people have been incredibly creative, and the universities have been incredibly creative and different types of learning. So the managers will work with you to look at your strengths and to look at your areas for development. So just be really honest about your abilities and your capabilities. And even pre-COVID, you know, I often think we're hiring just as much on potential as in current skills and on who the person is. And, you know, no newly qualified practitioner is the finished article, and neither are we, by the way. We're always learning. So some of the things you could do for support is find out about any local speech and language therapy or AHP or NQP networks. In Scotland, we've got Flying Start. I'm not sure if that's something they have in the other countries. and also use the RCSLT networks and just make full use of your supervision opportunities.
Sarah, do you want to come in? We've got a few questions coming in the chat box as well, so just for colleagues to note that we'll be coming back to those later. Sarah, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so I've had new graduates join my team who have had limited practical placement experience. I think that's fine as long as they can identify where the gaps are, identify what opportunities they're looking for, and I could, for the right person, I can work with them and I can build those opportunities and build in additional support where needed. So I think it's around, again, that connection with your manager, having that dialogue, being frank and transparent about where the gaps might be. And I think I said it before, I think it's around being a good fit with the organisation. So if you find an organisation that you think, actually, yes, they're going to support me, they're going to offer these opportunities that I haven't had, they have a vision for me in terms of my clinical development, I think that tells you something about that organisation that might resonate with you. So in terms of you choosing between job offers, I think that's something that's quite important to think about.
Thanks very much. So the next question to the panel is really about the change that's happened, which is around students seeing more and more rotational split posts becoming available. So just wanted to ask the panel what your thoughts and comments or suggestions are around choosing this kind of role. Pauline, do you want to start that response to that question? Thank you.
I mean, I think rotational posts are a good opportunity to really gain experience in lots of different areas. And I think it was the interest in the pie chart you showed earlier. I think it was like about 40% of people didn't really know where their interests lay. And just my personal experience, my first post was purely with children. Then I ended up working in an acute hospital. So it's good to get different experiences. But I would say that just to be aware that if you have lots of different client groups, it might take you a bit longer to gain your competence. So just be kind to yourself and realise that. But you can focus on the things that underpin working with any client group, you know, like clinical record keeping and taking a case history and assessment. So they'll apply across the board. But yeah, I don't think rotational posts, I think, be a good opportunity.
Sean, over to you.
Yes, well, I'm, as you can tell from my grey hair, I'm old enough to remember when it was completely normal to have departments that had both adult and paediatric work. So my first post was a couple of days of clinics, a couple of days of visiting adults in their own homes, and some special schools. So, and I have worked in, you know, I expected to work with adults long term, but there were just no openings, no staff openings. So I ended up working with bilingual children, which I really never expected to do. And if you'd have told me I'd end up working with bilingual children, I'd have probably run a country mile thinking it was too challenging. And then here I am working with trans adults. So I've had more than one career and I've enjoyed them all. And I think a rotational post you might find something that you really enjoy that you hadn't previously considered. And I think it's a really good mindset to stay open to different roles throughout your career, not just at the beginning. And as I think the panel have said, there are portable skills regardless of which caseload you are working with. And, you know, we're qualified to work with any client. You need to undertake further training for most specialist areas, but the RCSLT SENS are fabulous, welcoming, rich, experienced environments. So, you know, if you're thinking of an area, it's an area that you've never worked in before, then do make sure you join the SENS, make sure you read around the topic, and talk to your colleagues and ask for help, as we've said. So I think it's a really exciting opportunity. As Pauline said, be kind to yourself. You know, you cannot learn 3, 4, 5 different clinical areas in a heartbeat. It's okay to still be learning all the way through, and you'll become comfortable with that, and that's a great attitude to have through your career.
Great. Sarah, any final points from you on this one?
So in the private sector, it is becoming quite common to have an individual who may work for more than one organisation. That's kind of looking a little bit like a split post. And that's something that one of your NQP panel, Molly, talked about, where she works for one organisation for part of her week and another for the other half. I think that can work really well, as long as they're a little bit joined up. On the be kind to yourself point, I think sometimes new graduates do put a lot of pressure on themselves to complete their NQP competencies in that first 12 months. And I suppose my message is you're not supposed to be done by the end of that first 12 months. That's just the foundation, that's just the starting point. So don't feel that you have to learn everything in that first year. It is a lifelong learning profession. And we do always move between client groups. We're always coming across clients and patients that we haven't come across before. Use the resources we have around us, take those opportunities. The RCSLT website is a great source of information, both clinical, evidence-based practice. That's a good port of call when you reach these new opportunities, but do take the opportunities as they arise.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Absolutely, it's a lifelong learning, isn't it? I mean, we never know it all, and gosh, if we did, we may be missing out somewhere along the line. So absolutely, agree with you. So the final question is around supervision. Now, we've touched on this subject a number of times already, but if there's anything else you think you could add. So what should you expect from your supervision to help you stay safe and well at work? So Sean, you were particularly keen that people do ask for help. Do you want to just build on what you were saying earlier around supervision?
Yeah, sure. I think I've said well-being is paramount because we are supporting so many people. We're taking on that emotional load as well as the intellectual load of our problem solving and our assessments and our care planning. And I think people are almost unaware of the effect it can have on you. It's incredibly tiring. So you need plenty of little breaks in the day. If I were, I remember being told when I was newly qualified, sit down, have this cup of tea and this biscuit and don't move for the next 10 minutes because you've not stopped. And people around you will be concerned. You don't have to do everything today. I remember doing an assessment and thinking, I'm not sure how to do this assessment, and just saying to the parents, I'm going to get back to you about this. And of course the parents were completely fine with that, but I felt really guilty for not doing everything in an instant. And I soon realised that I've got a whole career to develop these skills in, and it's okay, it's better actually to take your time, reflect, maybe avoid a mistake that you might make by rushing to get everything completed. I also think you have annual leave and you're in charge of planning it. So your team will be grateful if you plan annual leave because they'll know about cover and all those kind of issues. But also it's great because we'll know you'll come back refreshed, ready to do all that work again and to support your service users, because there's no point meeting with somebody who's really stressed when you're already really stressed. It really affects your ability to problem solve, to think in a logical way. So self-care is absolutely key in my book, and you should not feel guilty about doing it. We tell our clients this all the time. Just look in the mirror and say it to yourself.
Thank you. Pauline, did you want to come in and just add your thoughts to that?
Yeah, so just to add, of course, this is about being safe and well in work. So as well as all of the usual health and safety at work, and all the physical things and all the new standard operating procedures and infection control, but really focusing on staff well-being and developing newly qualified practitioners has always been important, but the pandemic's only really highlighted that. So really make sure you do get regular supervision and that you are open and honest. I know we've said that before, but it's worth repeating. Nobody expects you to know everything, and it's fine to ask for help. So in Lanarkshire, we always start our NQPs with reduced caseload so that you've got time within your workday to read and reflect and ask questions. I think that's really important. And we don't want people to take work home, and we don't want people to work past their hours at all. We do not expect that. And I think starting any new job can just be really, really tiring, physically, mentally, and emotionally tiring. And really go back to the basics of self-care. And I was so happy to hear some of the NQP say that this morning, because I felt I was going to sound really sort of patronising and mumsy when I said this, but I really want to say, yeah, the basics of self-care. Make sure that you sleep well, that you eat well, that you and build something enjoyable into your day. So yeah, so supervision isn't just about the clinical element of that. It's about the restorative support that we all need as people and as practitioners. And just to add as well, there's such a strong link and such strong research to show that staff safety and well-being absolutely impact on patient safety and well-being. So we have a duty to look after ourselves and each other.
Very important point there, Pauline, that link between staff wellbeing and safety and patient wellbeing and safety. Sarah, over to you.
Yeah, I would agree with everything my colleagues have said. I suppose to add to that in terms of supervision, if you've got a problem today and supervision is booked for next week, don't wait till next week. Raise the issue when it's a small issue. Don't wait for it to become a huge issue and then park it in supervision, because managers will be available between supervision sessions. So that's really important to say. And in terms of workload, for any first job, juggling workload is really challenging. So I always say to my team, don't expect that by Friday at 5 o'clock, you won't be done. You'll be leaving things that you'll be picking up next week. It's kind of one of those jobs where you never really clear your in tray, and that's okay. You kind of just get comfortable with that. Don't keep working until you're finished, because you'll never be finished.
Okay, so we've got a few minutes for a final message from all of you before we get to the questions. We have had a lot of questions, just to alert you, so we'll see what we can get through. So Sean, a final message from you.
Just to say, you're the future of the profession. You know, I think it's tremendous that you've managed to achieve a very, very challenging degree in the middle of a historic pandemic, and to still have the enthusiasm to come to days like this and ask questions is brilliant. You know, and I think what I would like you to think is, if you accept a post, you will look back in a year, 2 years time and go, I had such good fun. I learnt lots, but I got to know my colleagues. You know, I got to know not just the speech therapy team, but everybody in the wider team as well. And I feel really supported and connected with everyone. And I love working as an SLT. What we don't want you to think is, I've worked every hour God sends, I'm completely exhausted, and I need to lie down for a year. You know, that you really want to enjoy your post. I love this work. You know, I think it's very, very motivating and wonderful. But you know, as Sarah said, my in tray is never empty, and I walk away, you know, at the end of the day, and I put the kettle on and I go and have a chat with a friend, and you know, it's going to be there tomorrow. And so, you know, just enjoy your first post. It really, really is important to have that good memory of developing into a much more confident practitioner.
Thank you. Pauline.
So yes, so my reflection is, I'm sitting here on the managers panel, but really I've got a good memory. And so just remember that everyone, all of us have had a first day, a first week, a first month, a first year, and you will survive, and then you will thrive. And so take the time to reflect and enjoy the experience. And I just want to add as well that, having listened to the speakers this morning, I am 100% reassured that our profession is in safe hands.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, to kind of reiterate what Sean said, I've been doing this a while and I still absolutely love this job. This is a job that brings challenges, but is so incredibly fulfilling. You are entering a profession that is going to inspire you. There are going to be fantastic opportunities. You're going to have experiences that you never knew you were going to have. I'm very proud of anyone who studied and got a degree over the last period. So well done, and best of luck. Enjoy the experience.
Thank you so much. So we have quite a lot of questions. I'm going to just see how many we can get through, because we have 10 minutes. Those that we don't get through, we'll be able to try and answer those through. Sorry, I'm just going to have a glass of water. Not very good, is it? If you're talking and you suddenly start to crackle. So we'll be getting back to you on through the website. Make sure that we do respond to the questions. Some of them are quite specific, but there are quite a few around working abroad. I think we'll come back to those after this meeting. In terms of flexible working and adjustments, there's a question for somebody who has a disability. With the move to home visits and community, how do you handle applications from students who can't drive due to disabilities? I see that the staff have put something in the chat box, but I don't know if any of the managers had a particular response to that question.
I think as long as you're upfront around what challenges you may experience and some things that may not be possible for you, a manager will be sensitive to that. I've had employees who have had disabilities, and we've just worked together jointly, really constructively, to build a package of support that works for them to enable them to do their job. So I think it's a dialogue. I think I would have it sooner rather than later. I wouldn't wait to be in post before I ask those questions. I think managers appreciate having that conversation early front.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Sarah said, I have had in every job as a team lead or a manager, I've had at least one person who's had reasonable adjustments. It's the law. We go beyond the law because we want our team to work really well and we want people to feel supported. So it wouldn't be an absolute block for me. It would be, as Sarah says, a negotiation, and I'd just have to have a rejig about how we allocated work, and we definitely do that. So I think, as Sarah said, get in there early, have that conversation. You'll feel better because you'll know the attitude of the manager is aligned with what you need.
Thank you. There's another question. There's a few questions about going and working abroad and completing your NQP framework, but as I said, I think I will answer that offline because it depends really, so it's a bit more complicated. Going back to this country and working in the UK, somebody has asked about whether it's a good thing to have a break and go abroad and have a bit of time off, if you would look badly at that person, or do you think that that's okay? What are your thoughts? Anybody wants to come in on?
I can come in on that. I would think neither one thing or the other, and I would just accept how they presented on the day of their interview. We've had plenty of people that have worked abroad, and the experience has kind of broadened their horizons. I hope we do manage to get abroad again because of COVID. I'm missing it. But yeah, I wouldn't make any difference at all to me.
Thank you. There is a question about the difference in applying for private sector jobs versus NHS, but I don't know if the person who's asked that question missed your point, Sarah, but I don't know if you had anything specific you wanted to add around, particularly with your hat on as Vice Chair of ASLTIP, and some advice, because I think we do get concerned about NQP setting up on their own, but that's different from applying for jobs with a practice. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of my role with ASLTIP is an organisation for speech and language therapists in the independent sector. You can join ASLTIP after you've been qualified for 2 years. So really, without having that support, it would be very challenging to do private work on your own, and not something I'd recommend in the first couple of years of working. However, applying to work for a private company or other private sector organisation is absolutely a viable option. Usually it's application by application letter and a CV. So it is worth putting a CV together if you are looking at private sector working. And then just making sure you ask all the questions that we've talked around support, supervision, opportunities to complete competencies, all the things that you'd expect in an NHS role. Just make sure that they're there in that organisation. But certainly I would encourage people to think about private sector as an option.
Just to add to that, my service is commissioned by the NHS, but is run by a collaboration between 2 charities. So just kind of really research what kind of, as Sarah said earlier, what kind of company, what kind of service it is as well. And there might be things like different pay and conditions, so it's really worth looking into that so you're really informed.
That's great, thank you. There's a question here about Band 5 development posts, and someone being told that they're quite right, there is a shortage of therapists applying for Band 6s, and we are looking at the moment to see how we can work with RCSLT SENS to support development of speech language therapists. What's your thoughts on whether it's a good idea or not for an NQP to just ring up and say, would you consider me for a Band 6 as in a development role? What are your thoughts, Pam?
I'm currently in the process of looking at exactly that. It's very difficult to get posts in the area I work in, and we welcome people inquiring. I mean, we will honestly know whether we'll find that acceptable or not. There would probably be very clear indicators of what we would require for people to move along a development post, and obviously that would often is negotiated with things like HR and looking at things like clinical competencies. But I think, you know, if it was a no, I wouldn't be annoyed. I'd be saying no, but we're thinking of, you know, we've got another post in the pipeline, come back to us later. So I think managers are not going to be offended by well proposed questions. You know, we're just going to go, that's initiative, we'll keep you in mind, you know, if other opportunities come along. So by all means, yes.
Any other reflections from Sarah or Pauline?
Yeah,
I would.
Oh, sorry,
Go, Pauline.
Sarah, you go first.
Sorry, Pauline. Yeah, I would agree. In the private sector, we would welcome applications at any time in the year. So even if there isn't a current vacancy being advertised, it is always worth asking, do you have any upcoming vacancies? Is there something that's in the pipeline? So there's certainly no harm in asking the organisation. If you really want to work for that organisation, there's absolutely no harm in getting in touch with them.
Yeah, I was just going to agree. It's fine to ask the question, and it gets your name out there as well. In recruitment, we do have to make sure that we're not discriminating against anybody. So it may well be that we would find a different solution, might advertise another Band 5, and then, you know, as the years went on, we would be able to offer a Band 6 vacancy to all the staff, because that's the important thing really for me, is fairness and equity. But yes, certainly ask the question. And also some of the boards, some of the trusts have AHP banks, which might be another way to get yourself some work, and so consider that as well.
Thank you. So we've had another question, which is around, I think you all talked about the importance of working contracted hours, but somebody's saying, do you have any advice on how to deal with pressure to work beyond contracted hours? Because they've been in settings where it's appeared normal to work overtime. So not sure how, if it's going to be challenging to not do that as an NQP, if it's seen as a norm by others. So any views on that?
I mean, I'm very strong on this, because I have had staff members over the years who have been very high risk of burnout, or actually had difficulties because they've overworked. Now, I have very active policies about that, and I check in. I even have how's your workload and how's your well-being on my staff meeting agenda as a regular item. Now, if you, when I talk to my students about applying for posts, I always say, speak to somebody who's already working for the department, speak to the manager, get all the different perspectives. If I realised that was kind of expected, I wouldn't accept that post. And several of my students have said, you know, I went along, looked at the post, I didn't like that there was very little support, there was very little acknowledgement of the unrealistic workloads. Don't work for them. You have a valuable skill set, you have a valuable degree, you deserve to be supported. And if that means I had to wait slightly longer for a job I wanted when I was newly qualified. I have left posts where I don't feel supported. You are a valuable professional. You should really, you know, consider that. Interviews are two-way. You're seeing if you would like to fit in with this team, just as we're seeing if you would fit in with us.
And I think that's a really good point to end on, Sean, because some of the other questions around things like the sort of movement from one job to another, the support you might get, further questions around support within the workplace if you have a disability. And really, I think, and also the approach, somebody said it was really good to hear, I think what you said, Sean, about looking at the patient's wider environment. So I think there is something about how you're interviewing the service as well as them interviewing you. I understand on Twitter there was a NQP decided to leave the profession because they were really unhappy. Well, we wouldn't want that to happen. So the RCSLT is also here for you. We have an information email address which will pop into the chat. So if anyone ever at any point feels concerned or unhappy, do contact us. We're here for you as a professional body. I also see that somebody's put in the chat something about the ability to wear masks and how that might hamper them with getting into work. I don't know, as a final question, if Pauline, Sarah or Sean, if you've got anything to say, and we can pick that up with that individual too. Pauline, do you want to come in?
Yes, so we actually have a couple of members of staff who are currently employed with us who are unable to wear masks, and we have made reasonable adjustments for them, and a lot is possible on virtual near me platforms. So again, it is just that point of be honest, tell people, and they will work with you, because if they want you to work there, it's not going to last forever. It's not going to last forever. We're going to get through this, and yeah, be honest and speak up.
And I think that's the same for a number of the questions is about asking about flexible working and all that sort of thing, is really to be upfront about those things. So I'm aware of time. We are now moving into our next refreshment break.